Everyone's talking about the interceptions, the missed throws, the pressure. But almost nobody is talking about how Shedeur Sanders responded when the heat was the highest. After the loss to Chicago, the cameras were rolling, the questions were loaded, and the narrative was already written for him. Rookie quarterback, too aggressive, pressing, not ready. That's what people wanted to hear confirmed. Instead, what they got was something very different. No excuses, no finger-pointing, no emotional deflection. Shedeur didn't dodge responsibility. He leaned straight into it. He admitted he had to play better. He acknowledged the turnovers. He talked openly about not pressing, even when the game gets away from them. And while critics rushed to clip sound bites, they missed the bigger picture hiding in plain sight. Because this wasn't the response of someone rattled. It was the response of someone already thinking 2 steps ahead. While the outside world is obsessing over completion percentage and box scores, Shedeur is talking about foundations, translation, and growth under pressure. He's not pretending the struggles aren't there, but he's also not letting them define him. And that mindset, that's not normal for a rookie who's getting blitzed, baited, and tested every single week. What makes this moment interesting is what went wrong on Sunday. It's what this press conference quietly revealed about how Shedeur views the entire season. When asked about pressure, he didn't complain, he smiled. When asked about defenses dialing it up, he called it respect. And when he talked about mistakes, he framed them as part of something bigger that's still being built. That's why this conversation matters more than the stat line. Because buried inside these answers is a message most fans didn't catch. And once you hear it, it changes how you look at everything that's happening next. This was the moment everyone clipped, but almost nobody actually understood. The questions came fast and they weren't subtle. Turnovers, pressing, falling behind, rookie mistakes. It was clear what the room wanted, a crack, a defensive answer, maybe even frustration slipping through. That's usually how these press conferences go when a young quarterback is under fire. But that's not what happened here. Instead of pushing back, Shedeur Sanders did something that caught people off guard. He took ownership immediately. No qualifiers, no ifs or buts. Just a simple admission, he has to play better. That alone separated this moment from the noise surrounding it. Because most rookies, when pressed like this, either over-explain or shut down. Shedeur did neither. He didn't spiral into excuses about protection or play calling. He didn't shift blame to receivers or timing. He kept it direct, calm, controlled. And that calm is what made the moment uncomfortable for critics. When asked about pressing to get back into games, he didn't act like it wasn't tempting. He acknowledged the instinct, then explained why he can't give into it. That's not a scripted answer. That's self-awareness. And it matters more than people realize, especially at this stage. What really flew under the radar was how confidently he spoke about seeing the field. He talked about recognizing coverages, identifying mismatches, and understanding what defenses are trying to do to him. Not hypothetically, actively, in real time, while learning on the fly. That's not the language of a quarterback who's lost. It's the language of someone processing the game faster than the results currently show. Even when asked whether defenses are baiting him because he's a rookie, Shedeur didn't take it personally. He brushed it off as football, as something every quarterback faces. That response wasn't dismissive, it was mature. Almost too mature for the narrative people are trying to push. And here's the key part. At no point did he sound shaken. Not frustrated, not overwhelmed, not desperate to prove anything in that room. Which is why this moment was misunderstood. People clipped the words about turnovers and missed the tone behind them. They heard accountability and mistook it for weakness. But what this press conference actually showed was a rookie quarterback who understands where he is, what's going wrong, and, most importantly, what comes next. And once you recognize that, the rest of his answers start to hit very differently. Here's the part most people completely overlooked. Shedeur isn't being attacked by defenses because he's weak. He's being attacked because they think he matters. When asked about teams dialing up pressure, blitzing more, and trying to force mistakes, Shedeur didn't sound frustrated. He sounded energized. He actually said he's excited to get everyone's best. That's not something rookies usually say when defensive coordinators are sending heat from every angle. But that comment tells you everything about how he sees himself already. Defenses don't empty the playbook against quarterbacks they don't respect. They don't disguise coverages, show simulated blitzes, and bait throws unless they believe the quarterback can hurt them if they play straight up. What Shedeur is facing right now isn't random chaos. It's intentional pressure designed to speed him up and test his discipline. And he knows it. Instead of complaining about the blitz rate or pointing to protection issues, he framed it as part of football. Something every quarterback goes through. That answer quietly shuts down the idea that he's being picked on as a rookie. In reality, he's being challenged early because teams want to find his breaking point. The problem is, they haven't found it yet. Even after mistakes, even after interceptions, he keeps playing the same way. He doesn't abandon structure. He doesn't start freelancing every snap. He doesn't let the pressure dictate panic. That's exactly why defenses keep coming after him harder. They're trying to force the moment where he presses. And that's where his comment about this year being the worst it's going to be starts to make sense. He understands something most fans don't. This pressure isn't permanent. It's a phase. Defensive coordinators test young quarterbacks aggressively early because once a QB learns how to punish it, the game slows down fast. What feels overwhelming now becomes predictable later. Shedeur isn't reacting like someone drowning. He's reacting like someone gathering information. He talked about seeing what defenses are doing, understanding pre-snap looks, and learning through real reps, not theory. That matters because you can't simulate this level of pressure in practice. You either experience it or you don't. And right now, he's experiencing all of it at once. That's why defenses keep dialing it up. They're trying to rush the process. They're trying to force mistakes before the picture fully clears for him. But if you listen closely, you can hear it in his voice. He's not worried about surviving the pressure. He's focused on what happens once he learns how to control it. There's a type of confidence you can coach, and then there's the kind that shows up before the results ever do. What stood out in this press conference wasn't bravado or hype. It was how normal pressure sounded to Shedeur Sanders. When he talked about blitzes, mistakes, and scrutiny, he didn't frame them as obstacles. He framed them as familiar territory. And that's the part that quietly separates him from most young quarterbacks. Shedeur openly admitted he's comfortable under pressure, not just on the field, but everywhere else too. That wasn't a throwaway comment. That was a window into how he's wired. Some players panic when the noise gets loud because they've never lived in it before. For him, noise has always been part of the environment. And that matters more than arm strength or stats. You could hear it when he talked about learning through real reps. He didn't rush the explanation. He didn't sound overwhelmed by the complexity of NFL defenses. He talked about trial and error like it was expected, like it's part of the process, not a sign of failure. That's a mindset most quarterbacks don't develop until years into their careers, if they ever do. What's even more telling is how he described progress. Not touchdowns, not highlights, just kept playing. For most fans, that sounds underwhelming. But in the NFL, that's survival. Plenty of talented quarterbacks fold after a few bad drives. They change who they are. They stop trusting what they see. Shedeur didn't. He kept throwing, kept communicating, kept trying to get everyone on the same page, even when timing was off. That's not something you can diagram on a whiteboard. That's internal stability. And it explains why he didn't flinch when asked about criticism. He understands that not every rep is supposed to look clean yet. He understands that trust with receivers isn't linear. One week it clicks, the next week it doesn't, and that doesn't erase progress. That perspective alone tells you he's not chasing quick validation. He's chasing control. The scary part for defenses is that confidence like this usually doesn't disappear, it compounds. Once a quarterback who's already comfortable under pressure starts syncing mentally with the game, the chaos stops feeling chaotic. And that's when mistakes turn into adjustments. That's why this section of the press conference matters so much. Because beneath the calm answers and measured tone is a quarterback who isn't reacting emotionally to his environment. He's absorbing it. And once that absorption turns into instinct, the league looks very different. This was the line that should have stopped everything, but somehow didn't. Buried in the middle of the press conference, Shedeur Sanders casually said something most rookies would never dare to say out loud. He looked at the pressure, the mistakes, the growing pains, and flat out admitted this season is the worst it's going to be. Not because he's lowering expectations, because he understands the curve. In the NFL, the early stage for a young quarterback is brutal by design. Defenses throw everything at you before you've seen it enough times to recognize patterns. They disguise coverage, overload one side, bluff pressure, then pull back at the last second. It's chaos on purpose, and Shedeur knows that phase doesn't last forever. That's what makes his mindset dangerous. Instead of reacting emotionally to every bad rep, he's treating this year like a foundation year, a translation year. He talked about how everything is finally starting to connect, how what he studied is now lining up with what he's seeing live. That's a subtle but massive shift, because once the mental side starts catching up, the game slows down fast. And he's already feeling it. What most people miss is that improvement at this level doesn't look dramatic at first. It looks boring. It looks like fewer forced throws, better decisions on second and third reads, knowing when not to press, even when the score says you should. That's the type of growth that doesn't show up in a highlight reel, but it absolutely shows up on film. That's why Shedeur isn't panicking. He understands that every mistake right now is data. Every blitz teaches timing. Every disguise sharpens recognition. Every miscommunication with a receiver exposes what needs to be fixed. And once those lessons stack up, the margin for error changes. What feels overwhelming early becomes manageable later. That's why he sounded almost excited talking about the pressure. He knows defenses won't always be this aggressive once he proves he can punish it. And when that happens, the game opens up in ways people aren't ready for. This quote wasn't arrogance. It was awareness. Shedeur isn't measuring himself against where he wants to be yet. He's measuring himself against where he started. And that's a dangerous place for a quarterback to be mentally, because once the learning phase ends, expectations change fast. And that's when the league usually realizes it judged too early. This is where the press conference quietly took a turn, and most people missed it. When Shedeur mentioned a private conversation with a veteran quarterback, it wasn't framed as a headline moment. There was no name-dropping for attention, no dramatic pause. He brought it up almost casually, like something that simply stuck with him. But what he shared revealed a major shift in how he's approaching the game. The message was simple. Stats don't mean SHT if you're not winning. That might sound obvious, but for young quarterbacks, it's one of the hardest lessons to actually live by. Early in a career, everything feels like a measurement. Completion percentage, yards, touchdowns. Every throw feels like a statement about who you are and whether you belong. And that pressure can quietly change how a quarterback plays. Shedeur admitted he's not chasing numbers. He's chasing wins. That's a big deal because it explains a lot about how he's evaluating himself right now. He openly said he hasn't been playing winning football lately. No sugarcoating, no excuses. But instead of spiraling into self-doubt, he framed it as a correction point, something he's already working to fix. That's the influence of experience talking. Veterans understand something rookies usually learn the hard way. Forcing production often creates more problems than it solves. You can throw for a ton of yards and still hurt your team if you're pressing, rushing decisions, or trying to make something happen that isn't there. Shedeur clearly absorbed that lesson. And you can hear it in how he talks now. He's focused on stacking plays, getting first downs, staying within the game even when the score or situation tries to pull him out of it. That's not flashy. That doesn't trend on social media, but it's how quarterbacks last in this league. What makes this moment even more telling is how respectful he was about it. He didn't go into details. He didn't speak for anyone else. He made it clear there are multiple voices in that locker room helping him grow. That's leadership in progress, understanding you don't have to carry everything alone. This wasn't just a casual conversation. It recalibrated how he sees success. And once a young quarterback stops playing for validation and starts playing for control, the game changes. The reads get cleaner, the decisions get sharper, the panic fades. That's the kind of growth that doesn't explode overnight, but when it shows up, it sticks. And that makes what comes next far more interesting than anything that's already happened. This is the part of the story that never trends, because it doesn't scream, it whispers. When people break down Shedeur's recent performances, the focus stays locked on interceptions and missed opportunities. But what's quietly happening underneath the surface tells a very different story. One that only shows up if you're actually paying attention to how he's responding, not just what went wrong. The biggest sign of progress wasn't a throw. It was that he kept playing. After mistakes, after stalled drives, after pressure kept coming, he didn't shut down. He didn't start rushing reads. He didn't abandon the structure of the offense to play hero ball. That's usually where young quarterbacks unravel, and he didn't. Instead, he talked about staying within the game, driving the ball, getting first downs, making mental notes and applying them in real time. That may sound basic, but it's not. That's discipline. And discipline under stress is one of the hardest things to develop at this level. Another thing nobody's really discussing is how openly he addressed trust with his receivers. He didn't pretend chemistry magically appears overnight. He compared it to relationships. Sometimes you're in sync, sometimes you're off. That honesty matters because it shows he understands football isn't just X's and O's. It's timing, feel, anticipation. And he's working through that in real games. He also acknowledged that progress isn't linear. One week things click, the next week they don't. But he made it clear that doesn't erase what's been built. That perspective alone tells you he's not judging himself snap by snap. He's judging trends, habits, reactions. That's a veteran way of thinking. Even when asked about diagnosing complex defensive looks, simulated pressure, late coverage drops, he didn't sound lost. He sounded patient. He talked about repetition, trial and error, learning through reps that can't be replicated anywhere else. And here's the key part. He's not afraid of that process. Most quarterbacks want the game to slow down immediately. Shedeur understands it slows down because you survive the chaos first. And every week he's doing exactly that, surviving, processing, and adjusting. This kind of growth doesn't show up in a box score. It shows up later when the same looks don't confuse you anymore, when the pressure doesn't rush your feet, when mistakes stop stacking. That's why this progress is easy to ignore right now. But it's also why it matters the most. Because once these quiet improvements start connecting, the results people are waiting for usually follow. And when they do, they don't feel sudden at all. This is where the conversation usually loses context, and where Shedeur Sanders is being judged the most unfairly. Anytime his name comes up, one stat gets thrown around immediately: completion percentage. Fans compare it to his numbers at Colorado and ask the same question over and over. Why doesn't it look the same now? Is it the competition, the defenses, the speed of the game? Shedeur didn't dodge that question. He didn't sugarcoat it either. He flat out said he has to complete the ball more. No excuses. And that honesty matters because it cuts through the lazy narrative that he's somehow confused or overwhelmed. The reality is this: NFL defenses are built to erase easy throws. In college, windows are wider. Matchups are clearer. In the NFL, everything is tighter, faster, and more disguised. Defenders don't just cover space. They bait quarterbacks into throws that look open for half a second. That's why Shedeur talked about structure, organization, sophistication. Those weren't buzzwords. They were explanations. Completion percentage at this level isn't just about accuracy. It's about timing, trust, and shared understanding with receivers. And when you're building that chemistry in real games, fluctuations are inevitable. Shedeur acknowledged that trust can feel strong one week and shaky the next, and that doesn't mean progress disappeared. It means the process is still active. What stands out is that he didn't blame scheme or supporting cast. He put it on himself to stack completions, stay patient, and work within the offense, even when the deep ball isn't there. That's important, because young quarterbacks often fall into the trap of chasing explosive plays to compensate for inefficiency. Shedeur isn't doing that. He understands that short and intermediate completions are what stabilize an offense. They slow down the rush. They punish blitzes. They force defenses to stop guessing. And once that happens, everything else opens up naturally. That's why obsessing over raw percentages misses the bigger picture. The question is whether his completion rate looks perfect right now. The question is whether it's trending toward control instead of chaos. And based on how he's talking and how he's processing mistakes, that shift is already underway. Completion percentage will always fluctuate early in a quarterback's career. But decision-making habits stick. And Shedeur is building habits that matter more than any single stat line. Because once timing and trust catch up to recognition, the numbers usually correct themselves. By then, the narrative has already fallen behind. This is where a lot of fans get fooled, and where Shedeur Sanders sounds way more advanced than people give him credit for. Anytime he connects on a deep throw, the reaction is immediate. Clips go viral. Praise floods in. People start saying, "That's his game." And while the deep ball absolutely matters, Shedeur himself made it clear he doesn't see it the way everyone else does. To him, it's just a throw. That answer caught people off guard because it didn't feed the highlight obsession. He didn't hype it up. He didn't act like it defines him. He talked about it the same way he talks about every other pass, something that still needs to be completed consistently, not admired. And that mindset matters. The deep ball is exciting, but it's also deceptive. When it works, it masks problems. When it doesn't, it invites chaos. Young quarterbacks often fall in love with it because it feels like the fastest way to flip momentum. But Shedeur understands something critical. You can't live on it. He openly said the offense can't become one-dimensional. If the deep shot isn't there, you still have to function. You still have to move the chains. You still have to stay on schedule. That awareness alone puts him ahead of the curve. What really stood out was how he explained timing with receivers. Deep throws give you margin. Short and intermediate routes don't. Those require anticipation, chemistry, and everyone seeing the play the same way at the same time. That's harder. And that's where real quarterbacking lives. Shedeur talked about conversations with receivers, adjustments made on the fly, reminders to get eyes around quicker, understanding when the ball might arrive before the route fully develops. That's advanced communication. That's trust being built in real time, not theory. And he didn't pretend it's easy. He admitted it's tough. Tough to sync. Tough to stay perfectly aligned when defenses are disguising coverage and pressure is closing in. But instead of avoiding that part of the game, he's leaning into it. That's why calling him just a deep ball thrower misses the point. He's actively trying to become well-rounded, to make the routine throws routine, to complete passes when the explosive option is taken away. That's how quarterbacks survive defensive adjustments and eventually force defenses to back off. The deep ball will always be part of his game. But it's not the foundation. The foundation is control, timing, and decision-making. And once those catch up to his arm talent, the deep shots don't disappear. They become smarter, deadlier, and harder to defend. That's when the myth fades. And that's usually when defenses realize the easy answers are gone. When you zoom out, this press conference wasn't really about interceptions, completion percentage, or even the loss itself. It was about how Shedeur Sanders sees the game, and more importantly, how he sees himself inside it. While the outside noise keeps jumping from one result to the next, Shedeur is clearly operating on a longer timeline. He's not chasing viral moments. He's not trying to win the press conference. He's not even trying to convince anyone watching that everything is fine. Instead, He's acknowledging the struggle while refusing to let it define him. That balance is rare. What this moment revealed is a quarterback who already understands something many players never fully grasp. Panic doesn't speed up development, it delays it. Every answer he gave pointed back to process. Staying within the game, building trust, learning through reps, treating pressure as part of the job, not a personal attack. Even when he admitted he hasn't been playing winning football, there was no self-pity in it, just clarity. And clarity is dangerous at this level, because once a quarterback knows exactly what needs fixing, the margin for growth shrinks fast. This press conference also exposed how far apart perception and reality really are. Fans see inconsistency and assume instability. Shedeur sees inconsistency and sees information. He sees film. He sees correction points. He sees a foundation forming under real NFL stress, not controlled practice reps, not theory, but live fire. And that's why the calm matters. Quarterbacks who fold under pressure usually do it early. Quarterbacks who survive it tend to look uncomfortable at first, but steady. That's exactly where Shedeur is right now. Not perfect, not polished, but grounded, aware, and still moving forward. What happens next won't show up all at once. It never does. It'll show up in fewer forced throws, quicker recognition, better timing on routes that used to feel rushed, defenses that stop blitzing as aggressively because the risk starts outweighing the reward. By the time the numbers catch up, the real shift will already have happened. That's why this press conference matters more than the stat line everyone keeps posting. Because it showed a rookie quarterback who isn't drowning in the moment, he's learning how to control it. And once control replaces chaos, the league usually realizes something a little too late. They weren't watching a player fall behind. They were watching one quietly figure it out.